I want to give birth to a white baby. The Apache woman who appeared at the cowboy's door. The cowboy sat alone in his small wooden cabin, the only light coming from the flickering fireplace. He had spent the entire day tending to his horses, repairing fences and checking on the cattle. Life on the frontier was hard, quiet, and often lonely. The cowboy had grown used to the silence, the only sounds being the occasional howl of a distant coyote or the rustling of the dry grass outside. He was just about to pour himself a cup of tea and rest when a sudden, firm knock on the cabin door startled him. The sound echoed through the empty room, and his hand instinctively went to the rifle leaning against the wall. Visitors were rare in these parts, especially at this hour. His heart beat faster, but he reminded himself not to panic. Slowly, he approached the door and looked through the small window. There, standing in the dim light of the evening, was a woman. She looked exhausted, her clothes dusty and torn from travel. Her dark hair hung loose around her face, and her eyes, though tired, held an intensity that immediately caught the cowboy's attention. There was something unusual about her presence, something that made the cowboy pause for a moment before speaking. He opened the door cautiously. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to sound calm, though a flicker of concern passed through his voice. The woman looked at him steadily. Her voice was soft but firm when she spoke. I need your help." "I want to give birth to a white baby," she said. The words were unexpected, shocking even, and the cowboy could barely comprehend them at first. He blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. "A white baby," he repeated, his voice showing both surprise and caution. The woman nodded. "Yes, please. I have traveled a long way and I have nowhere else to go. I need a place to stay, someone to help me." The cowboy hesitated. He had lived among many people and seen all kinds of situations, but nothing like this had ever happened to him. His mind raced with questions. Why would she want such a thing? Could he trust her? Was this some trick, or was she truly desperate? Still, something in her eyes told him that she was telling the truth. Her fear and determination were real. After a moment of silence, he stepped aside and motioned for her to enter. "All right," he said. "Come in. We'll see what we can do." The woman's face relaxed slightly, and she gave a small, grateful smile. She stepped into the cabin, and the cowboy quickly closed the door behind her, locking it for safety. Inside, the cabin was small but tidy. A simple fireplace crackled in the corner, and a few pieces of furniture were arranged sparsely around the room. The cowboy offered her a chair near the fire. She sat down carefully, placing her hands on her slightly rounded stomach. "I have traveled far," she said quietly. "I am alone. My people, they do not understand. They say it is impossible, but I believe it is not. I believe I can do this." Her words were filled with conviction, and the cowboy felt a mixture of awe and uncertainty. He poured her a cup of warm water and handed it to her. "You've come a long way," he said softly. "You must be very tired. You can rest here, but I need to know more. Why do you want this?" The woman looked down at her hands. "I have been told that this is foolish, that it cannot happen, but I have seen things, dreams that tell me it is possible. I want this child to be different. I want the child to see the world in a way my people cannot. I want hope, and I want something that is not like everything I have known." Her voice trembled slightly, but she continued with determination. The cowboy listened quietly. He had heard many stories in his life, but there was something extraordinary about this one. He had always believed in helping those in need, and despite the strangeness of her request, he felt a responsibility to protect her. He could see her exhaustion, her vulnerability, and the courage it must have taken to come to a stranger for help. Night settled in, and the wind outside howled softly. The woman spoke little after a while, sitting quietly by the fire, her eyes staring into the flames as if searching for answers within them. The cowboy kept a careful watch, making sure she was comfortable and had everything she needed. He brought her blankets, food, and water, and did his best to make the cabin feel safe and warm. As the night deepened, the cowboy found himself thinking about the woman's journey. She had traveled alone through rough terrain, facing dangers and uncertainty, all for a dream that most people would never understand. Her courage and determination impressed him deeply. He realized that he had seen fear and hope intertwined many times before in people's eyes, but rarely had he seen them combined in such a powerful way. By the early hours of the morning, the woman finally allowed herself to rest. She leaned back in the chair, closing her eyes, but she never fully let go of her vigilance. The cowboy watched her for a moment, feeling a sense of protectiveness he had never known before. He knew that the coming days would be challenging, but he also knew that he could not turn her away. The first part of their story was now set in motion. A stranger had arrived on his doorstep with an extraordinary request, and he had agreed to help. The nights ahead would be long, and the journey would be filled with uncertainty, but for now, they had found a fragile sense of trust and hope in each other's presence. The cowboy knew that life on the frontier was unpredictable. He had faced many hardships, from harsh winters to wild animals, but nothing compared to the challenge of helping this woman bring her dream into reality. He had no idea what the future would hold, but he was determined to do his part. And for the Apache woman, this small cabin in the wilderness represented safety, hope, and the possibility of a dream she had carried in her heart for so long. As the first light of dawn crept through the small window, painting the cabin in soft hues of gold, the cowboy stirred from his bed. He looked at the woman sleeping in the chair by the fire and felt a quiet sense of responsibility. This encounter, unexpected and extraordinary, was about to change both of their lives in ways neither could imagine. Outside, the wind whispered through the plains, carrying with it a sense of promise and uncertainty. The cowboy knew that the days ahead would test patience, courage, and understanding. Yet, he also knew that this moment, the moment he had chosen to open his door, was the first step toward something remarkable. And so, in the stillness of the early morning, two strangers, brought together by chance and fate, began a journey that would challenge beliefs, test courage, and reveal the depth of human determination. The Apache woman's wish, unusual and daring, had found a place of refuge, and the cowboy's life, long marked by solitude, was about to be changed forever. The morning sun rose slowly over the wide plains, casting long golden rays across the cowboy's small cabin. The Apache woman stirred from her sleep, rubbing her eyes and stretching her tired body. The night had been quiet, but the weight of her journey pressed heavily on her. She looked around the cabin with cautious relief, realizing that she had finally found a place of safety. For the first time in many days, she felt that she could breathe. The cowboy, already awake and tending the fire, glanced at her with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He poured himself a cup of coffee and offered one to her, noticing the careful way she accepted it. "You must be hungry," he said gently. "I can make some bread and beans if you like." The woman nodded, her eyes reflecting gratitude and exhaustion. "Thank you," she said quietly. I have not eaten properly for many days. My journey has been long." As they sat together eating the simple breakfast, the cowboy tried to understand her story better. He asked carefully, trying not to sound intrusive. "Tell me more about why you want this. I need to understand if I am to help you." The woman looked down at her hands, her fingers lightly tracing the fabric of her dress. She took a deep breath before speaking. "In my village, they do not believe in such things. They say a child like this cannot exist. They say it is foolish to try, but I have seen visions. I have dreams that show me a child different from the people around me. I feel that it is my destiny to bring this child into the world. I cannot explain why, but I know it is possible." The cowboy nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Her belief was strong, almost unshakable, and he could see that this was not a whim or a trick. She had traveled a great distance alone, with courage he had rarely seen. "I see," he said. "It is Unusual, but I can respect your courage. We will do what we can. But you must understand that this is not easy. You will need care, and I will need to know exactly how to help you." The woman's eyes shone with determination. "I understand. I will do whatever is needed. I trust you to help me. I have no one else." Over the next few days, life in the small cabin settled into a routine. The cowboy learned that the woman had walked through rough forests and dry plains, traveling from her village with only a few supplies. She had faced hunger, exhaustion, and the cold nights under the stars. Yet despite her suffering, she remained focused on her goal. Each day, she shared small pieces of her life, telling the cowboy about her people, her family, and the traditions that shaped her. The cowboy listened with patience and curiosity, realizing that this encounter was as much about trust and understanding as it was about the strange dream she carried. Neighbors from nearby homesteads soon began to notice the Apache woman. Word traveled quickly in the frontier towns, and whispers of her unusual request spread. Some were curious, some skeptical, and others outright disapproving. People asked the cowboy why he was helping her, warning him that such actions could bring trouble or shame. "She is asking for something impossible," they said. "You shouldn't be involved." But the cowboy remained firm. He had seen many hardships in his life, and he knew that helping someone in need was worth more than the judgment of others. "She is in need," he replied simply. "And I cannot turn my back on her. That is all that matters." Meanwhile, the Apache woman continued to prepare herself for the coming weeks. She knew that her pregnancy would not be simple, and she needed to stay healthy and strong. The cowboy helped her as best as he could, bringing fresh water from the well, preparing simple meals, and keeping the cabin warm. They worked together, learning from one another, creating a bond built on trust and shared purpose. Despite the growing trust between them, the cowboy could not help but feel the weight of uncertainty. He wondered what the future would bring, whether the woman's dream would come true, and how the world would react to the outcome. He had seen miracles in small ways, but he had never witnessed anything like this. Yet, he also realized that his role was not to question the dream, but to support her through the reality of it. As the days passed, the woman's story unfolded in small moments of intimacy and honesty. She spoke of her village, where she had grown up surrounded by mountains and rivers, learning the traditions of her people. She spoke of her family, of the challenges she faced as a woman trying to navigate a world that did not always understand her desires. And she spoke of the visions that had guided her, showing her glimpses of the child she longed to bring into the world. The cowboy listened quietly, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply sitting and watching the fire as she spoke. He began to understand that this was not just about a child. It was about hope, courage, and the desire to change one's destiny. The woman's determination reminded him of his own struggles on the frontier, of the moments when life had tested his patience and willpower. And in helping her, he found himself growing in ways he had never expected. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of purple, the cowboy noticed that the woman seemed more fatigued than usual. She sat by the fire, rubbing her belly gently, and her eyes were distant, lost in thought. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She looked up and gave a faint smile. "I am tired. The journey takes much from me, but I must keep going. There is no turning back now." The cowboy nodded. He could see the strength in her, but he also understood that strength alone would not be enough. She would need support, care, and patience, and he was determined to provide it. The following days were filled with small tasks and preparations. The cowboy made a bed for the woman near the fireplace, ensuring she would be comfortable. He gathered fresh herbs and clean water, doing everything he could to make her feel safe. She, in turn, shared knowledge of the plants and remedies from her village, teaching him ways to care for someone expecting a child. Their relationship grew quietly but firmly, built on mutual respect and shared effort. Despite the calm routine, tension lingered. The people in the nearby settlement continued to watch and whisper. Some brought unsolicited advice, others brought food or gifts, curious about the woman and her unusual request. The cowboy learned to navigate these interactions carefully, protecting the woman from gossip and skepticism while maintaining their own sense of privacy. In moments of quiet reflection, the cowboy thought about how fate had brought her to his doorstep. Life on the frontier was full of unexpected events, but this encounter was unlike anything he had imagined. He realized that helping her was not just an act of kindness, it was a choice that would shape both of their lives forever. For the Apache woman, the cabin became a sanctuary. She could rest, gather her strength, and focus on the dream she carried so passionately. She no longer had to fear the dangers of the journey or the judgment of those who did not understand. Here she was safe, and she could prepare for the most important moment of her life. As the sun rose and set each day, the bond between the cowboy and the woman deepened. They shared stories, laughter, and moments of quiet contemplation. The frontier, once lonely and harsh, now held a sense of possibility. The cowboy marveled at her courage, and she felt grateful for his support and trust. Together they faced the uncertainty of the future, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them side by side. And so, the days passed, filled with preparation, care, and quiet determination. The Apache woman continued to nurture the life growing within her, and the cowboy stood as a steadfast presence, ready to face whatever came next. Their journey was only beginning, and though the path ahead was uncertain, the first steps had been taken. Through shared effort, trust, and courage, they created a space where hope could flourish. The woman's dream, bold and extraordinary, had found an ally in the cowboy, and together they began the difficult but meaningful task of turning that dream into reality. The frontier outside remained vast and unpredictable, but inside the small cabin, a quiet miracle of trust and determination was taking shape. Each day brought them closer to the moment they had been preparing for, and each day revealed the depth of human courage and compassion. In this small, humble cabin, two strangers from different worlds were learning to navigate the unknown together, guided by hope, determination, and the belief that even the most impossible dreams could find a way. Days passed slowly on the frontier, and life inside the small cabin began to take on a rhythm of its own. The Apache woman and the cowboy had grown accustomed to each other's presence. They shared simple meals, kept the cabin clean, and exchanged stories about their lives. But beyond the walls of the cabin, the world was changing. Word of the Apache woman's unusual request had begun to spread through the nearby settlement. It started as whispers at the well, small comments made by those curious about the strange woman who had appeared at the cowboy's door. Soon the whispers turned into questions and the questions into gossip. Some people were skeptical, believing her story to be foolish or impossible. Others were suspicious, wondering why the cowboy, a man known for his quiet and careful nature, would allow her to stay. "They say she wants a child that cannot exist," one neighbor said to another, shaking his head. "It's unnatural. I don't know why the cowboy would help her." Another replied, "Maybe she is in danger. Maybe she has no one else. You never know, but it does seem strange." Despite the growing attention, the cowboy refused to be swayed by public opinion. He had always believed that helping those in need was more important than worrying about what others thought. He understood the woman's courage and the strength it had taken for her to travel alone to his cabin. He knew that judgment and gossip were part of life in a small settlement, and he chose to focus on the task at hand, keeping her safe and helping her through her pregnancy. The Apache woman, for her part, was aware of the attention she had drawn. At first, the whispers made her uneasy. She had not traveled this far to be watched and judged, but she also understood that people's curiosity was natural. She tried not to let it bother her, focusing instead on preparing for the arrival of her child. She spent her days resting, taking careful walks outside to stretch her legs, and speaking with the cowboy about the dreams and visions that had guided her journey. One afternoon, as the sun shone brightly over the plains, the cowboy noticed a group of settlers watching from a distance. They seemed hesitant, unsure of whether to approach or stay hidden. He walked over to the edge of the clearing and called out, "If you have questions, come speak with me, but do not cause trouble." The settlers approached slowly, curiosity and caution written on their faces. One of them, an older man with a serious expression, spoke first. "We mean no harm," he said. "We are just concerned. We've heard stories and we want to know if the woman is safe. We also wonder about the child she hopes to have." The cowboy nodded. "She is safe. She is my guest and I will care for her. As for the child, that is between her and the Creator. It is not for us to judge or doubt. I ask that you respect her privacy and let her be." The settlers exchanged glances, unsure how to respond. The older man finally nodded. "We will respect your wishes," he said. "But know that people will talk and some may not understand. We only hope for her safety." With that, the group dispersed, leaving the cabin and the woman in quiet once again. Despite the challenges from the outside world, the bond between the cowboy and the Apache woman grew stronger. They relied on each other for support, sharing tasks and discussing the future. The cowboy began to understand the depth of her vision, not as something magical or impossible, but as a reflection of her hope, courage, and determination. In the quiet evenings, they would sit by the fire, sharing stories about the past. The woman spoke of her childhood in the mountains, learning the ways of her people, the songs, the traditions, and the lessons her elders had taught her. She spoke of her family and the struggles she had faced as a young woman trying to navigate the expectations of her village. The cowboy listened attentively, sometimes asking questions, sometimes simply absorbing the warmth and resilience in her voice. As the days turned into weeks, the physical demands of pregnancy began to show. The woman's steps grew slower, and her hands sometimes trembled from exhaustion. The cowboy did everything he could to ease her burden, fetching water, preparing nourishing meals, and tending the small garden outside the cabin. He learned quickly how to care for her, guided by her instructions and her quiet knowledge of natural remedies. Despite the growing closeness, tension lingered. The settlers continued to watch from afar, some still whispering and speculating about the child she hoped to have. Occasionally, a visitor would come too close, asking questions or offering advice that was not always welcome. The cowboy stood firm, politely but firmly insisting that they leave. He knew that protecting her from scrutiny and interference was as important as any physical care he could provide. One day, the woman spoke quietly to the cowboy. "I feel the child moving more now," she said, placing a hand on her belly. "Sometimes I am frightened. I do not know what will happen, but I must be strong. I must not fear." The cowboy nodded, understanding her words not just as a statement of her physical state, but as an expression of courage and hope. "You are strong," he said softly, "and you are not alone. I will be here every step of the way. We will face it together." Her eyes softened with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered. "Your kindness, it is more than I ever expected. You have given me hope when I had none." Even as trust and understanding deepened, there were moments of fear and doubt. The woman sometimes wondered if the child would survive, or if her vision was merely a dream that could not come true. She confided in the cowboy during these moments, and he offered comfort with gentle words and practical support. He reminded her of the strength she had already shown, the long journey she had endured, and the courage it took to arrive at his cabin. The frontier outside remained harsh and unpredictable. Sudden storms would sweep across the plains, bringing wind, rain, and cold that penetrated the cabin walls. Yet inside, the small home was a place of warmth, protection, and hope. The woman and the cowboy had created a little world where trust and determination could thrive despite the challenges of the outside world. One evening, as the fire flickered and shadows danced across the walls, the woman spoke of her dreams once more. "I see the child clearly now," she said. "I see hope in its eyes. I see a future that is not limited by fear or doubt. This child, it is a promise." The cowboy listened, feeling the weight and beauty of her words. He realized that the journey was not just about the physical act of childbirth, but about courage, faith, and the power of human determination. In supporting her, he had learned lessons about resilience, empathy, and the strength of the human spirit. As the days continued, the woman grew quieter, spending time in reflection and preparation. She meditated, sang quietly to herself, and tended to her body with careful attention. The cowboy observed, learning patience and understanding the importance of emotional and mental preparation as much as physical care. Neighbors occasionally left small gifts, a basket of vegetables, a loaf of bread, or a jar of honey. They were gestures of goodwill, though tinged with curiosity. The cowboy accepted these offerings on her behalf, maintaining her dignity and shielding her from unnecessary scrutiny. Slowly, some began to see her not as a curiosity, but as a woman with courage and purpose. Through the weeks, a bond of unspoken respect and shared purpose grew stronger. The Apache woman began to feel a sense of peace she had not known in a long time. For the first time, she felt supported in her dreams and visions, understood and cared for in a way that transcended cultural and personal differences. The cowboy, in turn, came to admire her strength, resilience, and unwavering belief in the possibility of the impossible. Yet the anticipation of what was to come hung in the air. The child she hoped to bring into the world was nearing the time of birth, and the uncertainty of labor loomed over both of them. The cowboy could sense her growing anxiety, though she never allowed it to overwhelm her. He remained vigilant, preparing for the day when the child would arrive, knowing that the months of preparation had only led to this moment. In those final days before labor, the Apache woman and the cowboy shared quiet evenings by the fire. They spoke of life, of dreams, and of the world beyond the plains. They laughed softly at small stories, remembered moments from their past, and created a space where hope and determination could flourish. Though the outside world continued to watch and whisper, within the walls of the cabin, trust, courage, and understanding had formed a shield against doubt and fear. And so, the days passed, each one bringing them closer to the moment they had both been preparing for. The Apache woman nurtured the life within her with patience and care, and the cowboy stood as a steadfast protector and supporter. Together, they faced the growing anticipation with courage and quiet determination, ready for the challenges and wonders that lay ahead. The frontier outside remained vast and unpredictable, but inside the cabin, a story of hope, trust, and courage was unfolding. It was a story that neither of them could have imagined when she first knocked on his door, yet it was a story that would shape their lives forever. In the stillness of those days, as the sun rose and set over the plains, they prepared for a moment that would test their strength, faith, and humanity in ways beyond imagination. The days leading up to the birth were filled with a mixture of anticipation, anxiety, and careful preparation. The Apache woman had grown quieter, spending most of her time resting near the fireplace or slowly walking around the small cabin. The cowboy, meanwhile, remained vigilant, tending to every detail that might make her more comfortable. He had gathered fresh water, kept the fire warm, and ensured the cabin was neat and safe. Each task felt small in the moment, yet each carried immense importance as they approached the day when her child would arrive. The woman sometimes spoke of her dreams, of the visions that had guided her journey. She described images of a child with hope in its eyes, a child who would bring a new light into the world. The cowboy listened with patience, absorbing her words not as something strange or impossible, but as a reflection of her determination and courage. In her, he saw strength he had rarely encountered, a quiet yet unwavering resolve that seemed to grow with each passing day. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills, painting the sky with hues of pink and gold, the woman placed her hand on her belly and took a deep breath. "I feel it now," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "The child is moving more strongly. It is almost time." "I can feel it." The cowboy nodded solemnly. He had prepared for this moment, but he knew that preparation could only go so far. Birth was unpredictable, and he would need to rely on both instinct and guidance from the woman. "We will face it together," he said gently. "You are not alone. I will be here every step of the way." As the night grew darker, the first signs of labor appeared. The woman's breathing became heavier, and she began to pace slowly near the fire. The cowboy stayed close, ready to assist, while also keeping a calm presence to ease her fear. She had been through so much already, and now she faced the most intense challenge of all. "Breathe slowly," he instructed softly. "Let each breath guide you. You are strong. You can do this." The woman nodded, gripping the edge of a wooden chair to steady herself. Pain and exhaustion were evident in her face, but so was determination. She had endured countless hardships to reach this moment, and she was not about to give up. The cowboy remained a steady presence beside her, offering water, reassurance, and encouragement as the labor progressed. Hours passed, and the labor grew more intense. The cowboy learned to read her subtle signals, the way her hands tightened on the chair, the small sounds of discomfort she could not contain. He moved quickly to make her comfortable, adjusting blankets, bringing water, and creating space where she could find relief. He relied on every bit of knowledge he had, combined with the instructions the woman gave him, to guide her through each stage. Outside, the wind howled across the plains, rattling the windows and carrying the sound of the night into the cabin. The stormy weather mirrored the intensity inside, but within the small home, there was a sense of quiet focus. The cowboy and the woman were united by a single purpose, the safe arrival of the child. At times, fear and uncertainty threatened to overwhelm them both. The woman would pause, closing her eyes and biting her lip, her body trembling with effort. The cowboy would place a hand on her shoulder, steadying her with words of encouragement. "You are doing wonderfully," he would say. "Each moment brings us closer. Stay strong." Though the hours dragged on, there were moments of quiet connection. The woman would share brief thoughts, reminding the cowboy of her dreams and the reason she had undertaken this journey. "I want this child to live, to see the world differently," she whispered between breaths. "I want hope not just for me, but for the future." The cowboy nodded, feeling the weight and beauty of her words. He understood that this was more than just a birth. It was a test of courage, endurance, and trust. Each contraction, each wave of pain, brought them closer not only to the child, but to a deeper understanding of human resilience and determination. As the night wore on, the labor reached its most critical moments. The woman's cries filled the cabin, mingling with the crackling fire and the sound of the wind outside. The cowboy followed her every instruction, offering support and strength in whatever way he could. He knew that panicking would help no one, so he kept a calm voice, a steady hand, and a watchful eye, ready for whatever the moment demanded. At one point, the woman turned to him with exhausted eyes. "I am afraid," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I do not know if I can do this." "You can," the cowboy said firmly, placing a hand on hers. "You have come this far, you have faced more than most people ever will. This is just another step. You are not alone." The words seemed to give her renewed strength. She took a deep breath, focusing on the fire, the cabin, and the cowboy's steady presence. Slowly, she began to move through the contractions with more control, her body and mind working together in a delicate balance. Time seemed to stretch and bend in the cabin. Hours passed, though it felt like minutes. each one filled with tension, hope, and raw human effort. The cowboy remained attentive, bringing cool water, adjusting pillows, and offering words of encouragement. He learned quickly how to anticipate her needs, understanding that each movement, each groan, each breath was a part of the process. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the moment arrived. The woman cried out, a sound of both pain and determination, and then, with a final effort, she held her child in her arms. The cowboy breathed a sigh of relief, feeling the weight of emotion flood through him. The child was alive, and the long, difficult journey had reached its most profound moment. The woman looked down at her baby, tears streaming silently down her face. "It is here," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and love. "It is real. It is alive." The cowboy nodded, sharing in the wonder of the moment. He had witnessed many things in his life, but this raw, beautiful, and fragile miracle was unlike anything he had ever experienced. He marveled at her courage, her determination, and the quiet strength that had brought them through the night. For a long while, the cabin was silent except for the soft cries of the newborn and the gentle breathing of the mother. The cowboy watched them both, feeling a profound respect and connection. This night had tested every ounce of their strength, and yet they had emerged stronger, bonded by shared struggle and triumph. As dawn approached, the storm outside had passed, leaving the plains bathed in a soft golden light. The woman held her child close, rocking gently and whispering words of love and hope. The cowboy cleaned the cabin, prepared a warm meal, and sat quietly nearby, knowing that this was a moment that would remain in his memory forever. Though the challenges were not entirely over, the woman needed rest, nourishment, and care, and the child needed attention. They had reached a point of profound accomplishment. The impossible dream had become reality, and both the woman and the cowboy understood the depth of what had just occurred. In the quiet of the morning, as the first rays of sunlight illuminated the cabin, the Apache woman looked at the cowboy with gratitude and awe. "Thank you," she whispered. "You have helped me bring this life into the world. I could not have done it without you." The cowboy nodded humbly. "You did all the hard work," he said. "I was just here to help. You have shown courage beyond measure. Never forget that." They sat together in silence, watching the newborn sleep peacefully in her mother's arms. Outside, the world continued its unpredictable rhythm, the wind rustling the grass, the sun rising higher in the sky. But inside the cabin, a small miracle had taken place. It was a moment of triumph, of courage, and of hope that transcended fear and doubt. In the days that followed, the woman regained her strength while the cowboy continued to care for her and the child. They worked together to ensure that the newborn was healthy, warm, and well-fed. Each day was a small victory, a continuation of the incredible journey that had begun when she first appeared at his door. The frontier remained as harsh and unpredictable as ever, but inside the small cabin, hope, trust, and determination had created a space where life could flourish. The Apache woman and the cowboy had faced the ultimate test, and they had emerged stronger, bonded by an experience that neither could have imagined when their paths first crossed. And so, with the child safe in her arms, the woman looked to the future with renewed determination. The cowboy, ever watchful and caring, knew that their journey was far from over, but he also understood that they had faced the greatest challenge together and had succeeded. The days after the birth were filled with quiet wonder and careful attention. The Apache woman held her newborn close, feeling the soft warmth of life she had carried for months. Each small movement of the child, each tiny cry or yawn, brought her immense joy and relief. For the first time since beginning her long journey, she felt a sense of peace. The child's arrival had changed everything, her world, her dreams, and even the life of the cowboy who had guided her through the most difficult hours of her life. The cowboy remained a steady presence, performing small but important tasks to ensure their comfort. He fetched fresh water, prepared warm meals, and tidied the cabin, all while keeping a watchful eye on both mother and child. He had learned many lessons in his life, but none as profound as the strength and courage of the woman who had trusted him with her dream. He marveled at her resilience, the way she had endured the long journey, the pregnancy, and the exhausting labor. Now, seeing her holding the newborn, he felt both pride and humility. Neighbors from the settlement continued to observe the small cabin from a distance. Some had brought gifts, bread, fresh vegetables, or a small blanket for the baby. Others had been skeptical, whispering about the unusual request and the strange circumstances of the birth. Yet as the days passed and the child thrived, attitudes began to shift. People started to see the courage of the woman and the dedication of the cowboy. They realized that this story was not one of foolishness or danger, but of determination, trust, and hope. The Apache woman, for her part, was focused on nurturing her child. She spent hours holding the baby close, speaking softly, and singing gentle songs from her village. She wanted the child to feel love, security, and the warmth of family, even in the absence of a traditional home. She shared stories of her ancestors, of the mountains and rivers, of the traditions and wisdom passed down through generations. In these moments, the cowboy learned more about her culture, about the beauty and depth of her heritage, and he felt honored to witness it. Though the birth had been the most intense and challenging part of their journey, it was only the beginning. The Apache woman faced the next trials with the same determination that had carried her this far. She struggled with fatigue, the responsibilities of caring for a newborn, and the lingering doubts that sometimes clouded her mind. Yet, each day, the child's growth and strength became a source of reassurance and pride. She was reminded that hope and courage could overcome even the greatest obstacles. The cowboy observed her quietly during these moments. He saw how she gently cradled the baby, how she adjusted the blankets, and how she soothed cries with her voice alone. He understood that her determination was not limited to the extraordinary circumstances of the birth. It was a constant in every action, every thought, every decision she made. He respected her deeply, not only for the trust she had placed in him, but for the strength she demonstrated every day. As the weeks passed, the settlement around the cabin began to change. People who had once doubted the woman's intentions now spoke with respect and admiration. They saw that she was caring, resilient, and deeply committed to the well-being of her child. They realized that the cowboy had been right all along, that helping someone in need, no matter how unusual the circumstances, was always the right choice. One afternoon, the woman spoke to the cowboy, her eyes filled with emotion. "I never imagined I would find such kindness," she said softly. "You have helped me bring my child into this world safely. You have been my strength when I had none. I will never forget this." The cowboy shook his head humbly. "You did all the hard work," he replied. "I only helped where I could. The courage, the determination, that all came from you. You should be proud of what you have accomplished." Together, they worked to ensure that the child grew strong and healthy. The cowboy learned the routines of feeding, comforting, and protecting a newborn, guided patiently by the woman. They created a small rhythm of life in the cabin, where every day brought moments of care, love, and quiet triumph. Though the frontier remained unpredictable and sometimes harsh, within the walls of the cabin, they had established a safe haven for the child. The Apache woman began to reflect on her journey, thinking about how far she had come. She remembered the long walk through forests and plains, the nights under the stars, and the doubts she had faced along the way. She recalled the moment she had first knocked on the cowboy's door, desperate and uncertain, and marveled at how much had changed since then. She realized that the journey had not only been about bringing a child into the world, it had been about discovering her own strength, resilience, and the power of trust. For the cowboy, the experience was equally transformative. He had lived a life of solitude and routine, accustomed to facing challenges on his own. Yet, In helping the woman, he had discovered a new depth of compassion, courage, and human connection. He had witnessed the incredible strength of the human spirit and learned that even the most impossible dreams could come true with determination and support. As the days turned into weeks, the bond between the woman, the cowboy, and the child grew stronger. They were no longer simply individuals thrown together by circumstance. They had become a family of sorts, united by trust, care, and shared experience. The frontier outside remained vast and unpredictable, but within the small cabin, love and hope flourished. The Apache woman often spoke to the baby about the journey, explaining why they had traveled so far and the dreams that had guided her. She told the child stories of courage, perseverance, and faith, hoping that these lessons would grow within the young heart. The cowboy listened, occasionally adding his own stories of life on the frontier, teaching the child about resilience, responsibility, and respect for the world around them. Through these days of care and reflection, both the woman and the cowboy came to understand the true meaning of their journey. It was not simply about a request that had seemed unusual or impossible. It was about trust, courage, and the willingness to stand by one another in moments of uncertainty and fear. The birth of the child had revealed the strength that lay within them, and in nurturing this new life, they had found a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. Neighbors continued to visit occasionally, bringing gifts and checking on their well-being. Some came out of curiosity, others out of genuine concern. Over time, the attitude of the settlement shifted entirely. They no longer saw the Apache woman as a strange figure who had made an impossible request. Instead, they admired her determination, courage, and the successful arrival of her child. The cowboy's role as a protector and helper was recognized as well, and he earned the respect of the community for his steadfastness and kindness. One quiet morning, as sunlight streamed through the small window of the cabin, the woman held her child and looked out over the plains. "We have done it," she whispered. "We have made it through the journey. The child is here, safe, alive, and we are stronger because of it." The cowboy stood nearby, watching her and the child with quiet pride. "Yes," he said softly, "we have faced the unknown together and we have succeeded. This is just the beginning, but it is a strong beginning." The woman smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. "I have learned so much," she said, "about courage, about trust, about the strength within. And I have learned that no matter how impossible something seems, it can be achieved with determination and support." The cowboy nodded, understanding the truth in her words. "You have shown me that as well," he said. "Life on the frontier is unpredictable, but it is also full of wonder. We must face it with courage and sometimes with a little help from those we trust." As the child slept peacefully in her arms, the woman felt a deep sense of hope for the future. She knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she also knew that they could be faced with courage and care. The journey had taught her that dreams, even the most unusual ones, could become reality if pursued with determination and trust. The cowboy, watching them, felt a quiet contentment he had never known before. His life had been changed forever by the appearance of a stranger at his door. He had witnessed courage, endurance, and the beauty of human connection in its purest form. And he had learned that helping someone in need, no matter how extraordinary the circumstances, could bring profound meaning and purpose to his own life. Together, the three of them, mother, child, and the cowboy who had become a steadfast ally, faced the future with hope and determination. They had shared an extraordinary journey, one that tested their strength, courage, and trust. And they had emerged stronger, bonded by experience, and ready to continue life on the frontier with newfound understanding and resilience. The Apache woman whispered softly to her child, telling stories of courage, of hope, and of the journey that had brought them here. The cowboy listened quietly, feeling a sense of fulfillment and connection he had never anticipated. Outside, the wind swept across the plains, carrying with it a promise of new beginnings and endless possibilities. In that small cabin, far from the noise and judgments of the world, they had found safety, trust, and love. The journey that had begun with a desperate request had led to the creation of life, the strengthening of bonds, and the discovery of the profound strength that resides in every human heart. And though the frontier remained vast and unpredictable, they faced it together, ready to embrace whatever the future might bring.